Hello, welcome back. My name's Phil and this is the IELTS Grind. So today we're going to be talking about English grammar. I know it's not a very exciting subject, but it's something that can really help you with your IELTS exam. So most people look at grammar and think we have these different tenses and they all mean different things. But for me, that's not the case. If you want to really understand English grammar, then you only need to understand 3 concepts. Okay, that sounds weird, right? There are only 3 concepts. Well, that's the truth. And all we do is we play around with when these things happen. So let me show you what I mean by showing you Bob. So this is Bob. Can you tell me about Bob? Tell me about Bob. What's happening right now? Well, that's right. Bob is playing tennis. Bob is playing tennis. Now, have a look at Bob now. What could you tell me? Yeah, so if you said Bob plays tennis every day, that's correct. Now, have a look at Bob right now. What can you tell me? If you said something like Bob has stopped playing tennis or Bob has played tennis, something like this, you're right. So those are actually the 3 concepts that I'm talking about. So let's have a look at them again. So, Bob is playing tennis. So this concept is called the continuous. It's the progressive sometimes as well. The other example we had was Bob plays tennis every day. And that is the simple. And the third example that we had was Bob has played tennis. And that is the perfect. Okay, so let's not worry too much about when it happened, but we have those 3 concepts. So it's simple, continuous, and perfect. Let me give you a couple more examples of those. So for simple, we could say, Mary likes chocolate. I will pay for you. He woke up late. So Mary likes chocolate. I will pay for you. He woke up late. And also, it is cleaned every morning. How about continuous? Here are some more examples. So Fred is throwing a ball. I was eating lunch with Bob. I will be waiting for you by the bus stop. And the bank is being robbed. So Fred is throwing a ball. I was eating lunch with Bob. I will be waiting for you by the bus stop. And the bank is being robbed. So what about some examples of perfect? How about this? She's failed the exam. They had already eaten. They will have been married 10 years next April. And it has been lost, I'm afraid. So she's failed the exam. They had already eaten. They will have been married 10 years next April. And it has been lost, I'm afraid. So those are some examples of those concepts. So simple, continuous, and perfect. So what do we mean by those things? Well, let's start with continuous. So with English, basically, we're giving a message. That's what language is. We're passing on a message to the listener. So with continuous, we want the listener to know particular things about the action. The first thing is, it's important for the listener to know that the action is in progress. So what we mean by in progress is that it started sometime before the moment of speaking and started at some time after, or it started at some time before the moment we're talking about and finished sometime after that. So that's the continuous. We want them to know that it's in progress and that it has a beginning and an end at some point in time. With the simple, on the other hand, it's just important for the listener to know that the thing happens, or will happen, or did happen. And sometimes we use the simple to talk about things like habits, routines, or facts. Often we also use it to talk about a sequence of events, so one thing, then the next, another thing, and then another thing. But there's no link between one thing happening and another thing happening. So the events, they're not linked. They just happen. So that's the simple. The perfect is very different to the other 2 concepts. So the idea here, the message is, it's not the action, it's actually the result or the effect. And that's a little bit tricky, because even though we say something like, she has failed the exam, the information isn't about the failing of the exam. It's actually the result. What's the result here? She has to do it again, or she can't go onto her university of choice, whatever the result may be. So with the perfect, it's the effect, it's the result that's important. Also, by using the perfect, we're saying that the action happened or ended recently in terms of the moment we're speaking about, or even that it's ongoing, just at the moment we're talking about, it has the result. More on this in another video. And the last thing we're trying to say with the perfect is that the action, or the result I should say, the result didn't change. So from the action happening, the result is the same. If it has changed, we can't use the perfect. We have to use the simple or the continuous. So if you're with me so far and you're liking what you're hearing, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. That way you're not going to miss any more of these videos. But let's move on and talk about how exactly we can form these different concepts and how we use them in different grammar tenses. So basically what we're doing is, with the concept, we're changing the moment that we're talking about. So if you can understand what's known as the present continuous, for example, I am speaking English, if you just change the moment that we're focusing on, so here we're talking about right now, if we changed it to the past, this becomes past continuous. But the idea doesn't change. I was speaking English yesterday. We're still talking about the fact that at that time, in the past, the action was in progress. And it's important for you to know that. And that it had an end, a beginning and an end. So if you can understand the concept in the present, it works for the past and the future. So the other thing, if we go back to our examples before, the concepts, they work in the active and the passive. So if you're not sure what the active or the passive is, we have another video about that, and you'll find the link in the description. But the basic question you have to ask yourself for active or passive, who did it? If the subject does the action, then it's active. If the subject does not do the action, then it's passive. But these concepts work in both active and passive sentences. So let's look at the structure. To form the continuous, what we need is a subject. We also need the verb to be, and we need the verb plus ing. Now, if we are using the future form, we just put will or won't in front of be. If we're using the present, we change to be to am, is, or are. If we're using the past continuous, we change to be to was or were. But the basic structure doesn't change. The same thing happens with the simple. What we need is the subject and we need the verb, which we change. If we're using the future form, we just put will in front of the verb. So, for example, I will eat. In the present, I eat, she eats, and in the past, I ate, she ate. So the structure doesn't change. But there's one exception. There's one rebel verb, and it doesn't follow the rules in the simple and the past. Do you know which verb it is? It's the verb to be. The verb to be does not follow this structure. So, for example, with the verb to be, what we need is we change it with the subject, and it changes from I was, I am, you were, you are, he was, he is. But with the verb, with will, it's the same in the future. So I will be, he will be, she will be. But it's the only exception to the rule here. And in the perfect, we have the subject, we need the verb, the auxiliary verb to have, and we follow it by the verb that's called the past participle. If you don't know what the past participle is, it's the third part of the verb. So, for example, go, went, gone. It's that part of the verb that we need. So if we are talking about the present perfect, we have I, for example, I have finished speaking, he has finished speaking, for example. If it's the past, we use the past form of the verb to have. So I had finished speaking, he had finished speaking. And with all the other structures, if we're talking about the future, we put in will. So I will have finished speaking, he will have finished speaking. So the structure there, it doesn't change too much. You just have to change a few little things. The general structure is exactly the same. So these are the three concepts of English, and if you can understand that, the continuous is just telling someone it's important to know that the action is in progress and it has a beginning and an end. The simple, it's just an action that happens, has no link to other actions, even though they can happen in a sequence. And the perfect is all about the effect or the result. If you understand that in the present, you can use it in the past, you can use it in the future. It's exactly the same. So, thanks very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a comment if you've got any questions, and I will see you next week. Thanks for watching.